I never thought a simple walk to the coffee shop would change my life forever. One second, I was crossing the street, and the next, a sleek black car hit the brakes just in time. The man behind the wheel, a billionaire. And from that moment on, nothing was ever the same. Hey y'all, it's me. This story is real, raw, and something I never expected to experience. So grab a drink, get comfy, and listen close. You won't believe how one moment with a billionaire turned my world upside down. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you love unexpected love stories and real drama. I remember that morning so clearly. It was one of those days where everything felt rushed, like the world woke up 10 minutes before I did. I was juggling my bag, sipping lukewarm coffee from a chipped mug, and trying not to trip over my own shoelaces as I dashed out the door. I was already late for my shift at the bookstore, and my boss had made it very clear that if I was late one more time, I'd be looking for a new job. So yeah, I was walking fast, maybe too fast. The sun was just peeking through the clouds, and the street was quieter than usual. I stepped off the curb without really thinking, eyes fixed on the blinking crosswalk sign. And then I heard it, the sound of tires screeching against pavement, followed by my heart pounding so hard I thought it might leap out of my chest. A sleek black car came to a stop just inches from my legs. My hands were shaking, my breath caught in my throat, and for a moment I just stood there, frozen. Then the door opened. A man stepped out, and the first thing I noticed was the sharpness of his suit and the calm concern in his voice. "Are you okay?" he asked, gently but firmly. I nodded, still too stunned to speak. He apologized over and over, insisting it was his fault, that he wasn't paying attention. I told him I was fine, even though my knees said otherwise. I didn't know it yet, but that moment, right there on the street, was the start of something. Something wild, unexpected, and bigger than anything I'd ever imagined. I had no clue who he was, but that was about to change. As he stood there, looking at me like I was the most important thing in the world at that moment, something shifted. You know that feeling when your heart skips, not from fear or panic, but from recognition? That's what it felt like. I didn't know him, hadn't seen his face before, but there was something in his eyes, like we'd met before in some other life. Silly, right? But I couldn't shake the feeling. "I really am sorry," he said again. "I didn't see you crossing. Are you sure you're all right?" His voice had this calm strength, like someone who was used to being listened to, but still knew how to speak gently. I finally found my voice and said, "I'm fine, just a little rattled." He looked down at my hands, which were trembling ever so slightly. "Do you live nearby? I can drive you. I insist." That made me snap back into reality. "No, thank you. I'm good, really." I didn't need a stranger, especially some rich-looking man I'd never seen before, knowing where I lived. But he didn't push, just gave this soft smile and nodded like he understood, like he respected that boundary. Then, just as I was about to walk away, he said something that stuck with me. "I don't usually come down this street. My driver took the day off, and I was running late." He gave a half laugh. "Funny how the universe throws two people together like this, huh?" I nodded politely, still unsure what to make of him, and went on my way. But I could feel his eyes on me as I walked off. Later that night, as I curled up in bed, I couldn't stop thinking about that moment. Not the car, not the near miss. Him. The way he looked at me, not in a sleazy or flirty way, but in that rare, curious way that said, "I see you." And I don't get seen like that often. Most days I blend into the background, just another tired black woman in a big city, hustling to survive, invisible to most. That next morning, I got to the cafe where I worked my second job. The shift was dragging, like most of them did. Same faces, same orders, same tired feet. I was wiping down the counter when I saw someone tall walk in, and for a second I froze. It was him, the same man from yesterday, walking in like he belonged there, dressed down in jeans and a button up this time, but still polished. He spotted me instantly, smiled, and walked over. "I thought you said you were fine," he teased, motioning to the slight limp I didn't realize I still had. "Can I buy you a coffee? Make up for nearly turning you into roadkill?" I didn't know whether to laugh, roll my eyes, or run, but something in his voice disarmed me. It wasn't charm, it was something else. Realness? Earnestness? I couldn't tell. I just knew that, despite every reason not to, I said yes. So we sat. At the back of the cafe, him with a black coffee, me with my usual chai latte. We talked about books, about work, about how I was juggling two jobs and barely had time to breathe. He didn't interrupt. He didn't make it about him. He just listened. For the first time in a long time, I felt like someone genuinely wanted to know me, not fix me, not impress me, just know me. And that was the part that really left me shaken. Not the car, not the crash. Him. After that day in the cafe, I thought maybe that was it. A random moment, a strange connection. And then we'd go back to our separate lives. Rich man, regular girl, two different worlds. I wasn't expecting anything else, and honestly, I didn't want to read into it too much. I've learned that hoping too hard for something can hurt more than just letting things pass. But he clearly didn't get that memo. The very next morning, he came back. Same cafe, same quiet confidence. This time, he ordered his coffee and just stood at the counter, waiting for me to notice him. I looked up, and there he was, smiling like we shared a secret. "Still standing," he said, eyes sparkling. I couldn't help but laugh. From then on, it became a thing. He started showing up more, once, twice, even 3 times a week. Always early, always polite, never crossing the line. He'd sit and sip his coffee, sometimes reading a book, sometimes just watching the city move outside the window. And on days when the cafe wasn't too busy, he'd talk to me, ask questions, real ones, not just, "How are you?" and "What time do you get off?" He'd ask what kind of music I listened to, what made me feel alive, what I dreamed of doing if money wasn't a problem. At first, I thought maybe he was just curious. Maybe he felt bad for hitting me with his car. Maybe this was some weird guilt thing. But as time passed, it felt like something else. Like he actually enjoyed being around me. He never tried to impress me, never flashed his wealth or bragged about his life. In fact, it took weeks before I even found out who he really was. One night after my shift, I got curious. I typed his name, Nathan Caldwell, into Google, and there it was, articles, photos, net worth estimates with more zeros than I could count. CEO of one of the biggest software firms on the East Coast. A literal billionaire. My jaw dropped. I stared at his picture on my cracked phone screen, the same smile I'd seen across the cafe for weeks. I felt this wave of disbelief, then anxiety. Why was someone like him hanging out with someone like me? I remember looking at myself in the mirror that night, wearing my dollar store lip balm and a hoodie with a hole in the sleeve, wondering if this whole thing was a joke I wasn't in on. But the next day, when he came in again and said, "Hey, I found this record store I think you'd love," all that melted away. His energy never changed, still simple, still honest. Eventually, he asked me to get coffee with him, outside the cafe. A proper sit down, no apron, no noise, just us. I almost said no. My heart told me yes, but my head? It screamed all the reasons I shouldn't. The gap between our lives was too wide, too risky. But deep down, something inside me didn't want this connection to be over. So I said yes. We met at this small corner cafe, quiet and warm. I wore my nicest thrift store dress, nervous out of my mind. But when he saw me, his face lit up like I was wearing a red carpet gown. "You look beautiful," he said, without hesitation. No cheesy grin, just a compliment that felt real. And for the next 2 hours, we talked like old friends. He told me about his childhood, how he'd grown up poor, how money didn't fix everything like people thought. And I told him things I hadn't shared with anyone in years, the fears, the pressure, the way I sometimes felt invisible. That day didn't feel like a date. It felt like the start of something, something I couldn't name yet. But I knew I didn't want it to end. And neither did he. I don't know exactly when it clicked for me that this wasn't just some random connection, that this man wasn't just showing up because he was bored or curious. It was deeper than that. But the more I learned about Nathan, the more conflicted I became. Because on one hand, he made me feel seen in a way no one ever had. And on the other hand, the world he came from felt 1,000 miles away from mine. At first, he avoided talking about his money. Honestly, I respected that. He didn't drop names, didn't mention his company, didn't even own a flashy watch. If you met him without knowing anything, you'd think he was just a regular guy with good manners and expensive shoes. But once I found out who he really was, once I Googled him and saw all the headlines and photos and Forbes articles, it made everything suddenly feel off balance. I started pulling back a little, not because he changed, but because I started doubting myself. I'd show up to work with my frizzy hair and scuffed up sneakers, and I'd imagine him at fancy boardrooms or black tie events. I knew he could afford anything, go anywhere, be with anyone, and I couldn't stop thinking, why me? He must have noticed the shift because one day he stayed behind after the cafe closed. We were sitting at the back, the lights dimmed and the espresso machine humming in the background. He looked at me and said, "I feel like you're drifting." I didn't deny it. I just stared at my hands. "I'm just trying to understand what this is," I said quietly. "You're you, and I'm just me." He leaned in, elbows on the table, voice soft but serious. "You think I don't notice how hard you work? How much you carry without complaining? That you keep showing up even when you're exhausted? That's rare, you know. And no, I don't care what your bank account looks like. I care about you." His words caught me off guard, not because they were dramatic, but because they were so intentional. Like he'd actually thought about what I needed to hear, not in a way that was trying to fix me or flatter me, but in a way that made me feel safe, like he saw past the surface and into the messier parts of me, and still chose to stay. Over the next few weeks, we spent more time together outside the cafe. Simple things, walks in the park, sitting on a bench eating street tacos. He'd show me these little corners of the city I'd never noticed before, like he wanted me to fall in love with the world again. And every time I tried to create distance, he'd gently close it, never forcing, always patient. I started asking him questions, too, about what it felt like to have more money than you could ever spend, about the pressure, the fake smiles, the weight of being responsible for hundreds of employees. And he was honest, surprisingly honest. He told me that sometimes being a billionaire felt more like a prison than a privilege, that people treated him like a product, not a person, that most of his friends were really business transactions, and that the only time he ever felt real anymore was when he was sitting across from me. That hit me hard because I'd spent so much time feeling like I wasn't enough, like my world was too small for someone like him. But here he was, this powerful man, telling me my world gave him the one thing he couldn't buy, peace. And that was the moment I stopped trying to push him away, because maybe, just maybe, he was exactly where he wanted to be, with me. When he asked me to dinner, I hesitated. Not because I didn't want to go. God knows I did. But because everything in me screamed that I didn't belong in his world. I imagined linen tablecloths, waiters in suits, and people who judged you just by the shoes you wore. And I didn't have anything close to a dinner outfit. My wardrobe was thrift store basics and borrowed earrings. I stood in front of the mirror for 20 minutes before the date, staring at myself in a plain black dress that barely fit right, wondering if I should just cancel. But I didn't. Something inside me, maybe hope, maybe curiosity, pushed me out the door. He picked me up himself, no driver, just him, in a sleek black car and a navy blazer that made him look like he belonged on the cover of a magazine. When he saw me, he smiled like I was a vision. Not once did he look me up and down the way other men had done before. He didn't comment on what I was wearing or how my lipstick was slightly uneven. He just said, "You look beautiful," like he meant it. The restaurant was high up, a rooftop place with city lights twinkling all around. I'd never been somewhere so fancy in my life. There were people in cocktail dresses, men with Rolexes and voices that carried. But when we walked in hand, he acted like I was the only one who mattered. He pulled out my chair, ordered my drink for me because I was too nervous to read the menu. Talked to me like we were just two old souls catching up, not two people from opposite ends of the world. We laughed a lot, talked about childhood memories, awkward teenage years, and even the weird fear I had of elevators, which he found hilarious. He opened up more, and so did I. And the way he looked at me, it wasn't just admiration. It was something deeper, like I was helping him remember a part of himself he'd lost. I was starting to let myself relax, starting to feel like maybe, just maybe, I could fit in his world, when I noticed two women at the next table staring, whispering. One of them looked directly at me and laughed, then leaned in to say something to her friend. I don't know what she said, but I didn't have to hear the words. I felt them, that old familiar sting of not being good enough, the ache of being looked down on, like you're out of place. I tried to ignore it, but I must have gone quiet, because Nathan touched my hand and asked if I was okay. I nodded, smiled, but inside I felt that wall going back up, that reminder that no matter how good this felt, we were still from two very different planets. After dinner, he walked me home. The city was quiet, the breeze soft, but my thoughts were loud. I told him about the women, about how I'd felt them judging me, how small I felt, even sitting beside someone who made me feel so safe. I told him I wasn't sure I could keep doing this, that maybe it was better if we stayed in our lanes before things got complicated. He didn't argue, didn't beg. He just stopped walking, turned to me, and said, "They don't know you, but I do. And nothing they say could ever change how I feel when I'm with you." I wanted to believe him. God, I really did. But as I walked up to my apartment that night, a part of me wondered if love, real love, could survive in a world where people like me were still being questioned for simply existing in someone else's space. I didn't have the answer, but I knew this story wasn't over yet. The next morning, I woke up with this tight feeling in my chest, like I was holding my breath without realizing it. I kept replaying that dinner in my head, the way those women looked at me, the way Nathan had tried to comfort me, the way I'd pulled away. It all felt like too much, too fast. One part of me wanted to run back to the version of my life I understood, the version where everything was predictable, even if it was lonely. But life doesn't give you space to sort through your feelings when you're living paycheck to paycheck. I had a shift at the bookstore that morning and then another at the cafe later that night. No time to cry, no time to think, just move. Nathan didn't text that day, or the day after. No calls, no surprise visits. It was like he vanished, and I couldn't tell if he was giving me space or if I'd scared him off. At first, I told myself I didn't care, that it was probably for the best. He'd go back to his billionaire world, and I'd go back to mine. I convinced myself that I was protecting my heart, that stepping away meant I had control. But then came the silence, the kind that eats away at you in the little moments, like when you check your phone too often, even though there are no notifications, or when you catch yourself smiling at something you want to tell him, only to realize he's not around to hear it. The absence hit me harder than I expected. 3 days passed. 3 days of silence, of pretending I was fine, of replaying everything I'd said and wondering if I'd ruined something good. Then, on the fourth day, there was a knock at my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. I wasn't even dressed, just in an oversized hoodie and socks, hair in a puff, face bare. I peeked through the peephole and froze. It was him. Nathan stood there, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers and something in his other hand I couldn't quite see. I opened the door, and before I could say anything, he looked at me with this quiet intensity and said, I needed a few days, not to disappear, but to think. And now I know exactly what I want. He stepped back and handed me a tablet. I stared at the screen. It was a live stream of a press conference. Confused, I pressed play. There he was, standing in front of a podium, reporters crowding around him. He looked tired, but calm. And then I heard his words. I built this company from nothing, but somewhere along the way, I lost the part of myself that mattered most, the part that knew love was more important than power, that peace is more valuable than profit. So today, I'm stepping down, not because I'm giving up, but because I'm finally choosing me. My hand flew to my mouth. He turned to me at the door and said, You made me see what I've been missing. And I don't care what the world thinks. I want a life that feels real, and that life includes you. I didn't know what to say. My brain was spinning, my heart pounding. I wasn't used to people choosing me, not publicly, not boldly. And yet, there he was, the man I thought I'd lost, choosing me in front of the whole world. And suddenly, every doubt, every fear, every whisper of, You're not good enough, began to fade. Because this wasn't just a love story anymore. This was a choice, his, and maybe mine too. You know how people say life can flip in a single moment? I used to roll my eyes at that. I thought, no, life flips after years of hard work, slow growth, struggle, and climbing. But when Nathan stood at my doorstep that day, flowers in one hand, his career in the other, it flipped. And I was the reason. Even now, I get chills thinking about it. Watching that press conference, hearing his voice tremble just a little as he stepped down from the empire he built. It was surreal, like something out of a movie, except it was my life. And in that moment, I didn't see a billionaire. I didn't see a CEO. I saw a man, just a man, risking everything to be real again. I didn't cry right away. I was too stunned, too overwhelmed. I just stood there, staring at him, gripping the edge of the tablet with both hands. My mouth was open, but no words came. Nathan, the man who used to walk into rooms with power in his stride and silence in his eyes, looked nervous, like he didn't know what I'd say, like he was bracing for rejection. And maybe a few weeks earlier, I would have said no. Maybe I would have let fear win. But in that moment, something in me shifted too. I stepped outside. I didn't even have shoes on, just socks on the cold concrete. I stood in front of him and whispered, Why me, Nathan? He smiled, a small, tired, real smile, because you make me feel like a person, not a brand, not a headline, just me. And suddenly, the words were there. You're insane, I said, laughing through the lump in my throat. But I think I'm in love with your crazy self. We stood there, wrapped in this weird mix of shock and relief, and that warm, slow burning kind of joy that only comes when something truly impossible becomes real. He didn't try to kiss me, didn't push. He just took my hand and said, "I don't need anything else, just this, just us." The days that followed were a blur of change. The media went wild. Of course they did. Everyone had questions. Why did he step down? Who was the girl? Why wasn't she famous, or rich, or white, or any of the things the world seems to expect from someone in his position? I saw the headlines. Billionaire walks away from empire for unknown black woman. Power couple or PR stunt? Mystery girl melts the Ice King's heart. I won't lie, it got to me. The judgment, the stares, the way people tried to turn me into a symbol or a scandal instead of a human being. But every time I started to shrink back into myself, Nathan was right there. He stood next to me at every event, defended me in every interview, introduced me not as his girlfriend, but as the woman who saved his life. He didn't just choose me, he protected me, and that made all the difference. One night, weeks later, we sat on the fire escape of my tiny apartment, watching the city below. No cameras, no makeup, just us and the sound of traffic in the distance. He turned to me and said, "You know, I've had homes with more rooms than I could count, but this little balcony with you feels more like home than any of them ever did." I leaned into his shoulder and whispered, "You didn't crash into me that day, Nathan. You found me." And that's when I knew, for the first time in my life, that love could be loud and quiet, wild and gentle, messy, real, ours. It's funny how one moment can brand you forever, how a stranger almost running you over can lead to something as life-altering as love. People still talk about that day like it was fate, like the universe orchestrated a near accident so two people from opposite sides of the world could meet. I don't know if I believe in fate, but I do believe in timing. And in that moment, crossing that street, holding my breath, staring into the eyes of a man I didn't know yet, I think something in me knew, not consciously, not clearly, but somewhere deep down, I felt it. And now, I'm not just the girl a billionaire almost hit. I'm the woman he chose. But let me be real with you. It hasn't all been pretty Instagram posts and perfect fairy tales. There have been challenges, ugly ones, people questioning my worth, whispering behind my back, making assumptions about what I wanted from him. And sometimes, even I started believing them, wondering if I was playing a part in a story too big for me. But Nathan never let those thoughts take root. Whenever I felt small, he reminded me I wasn't. He helped me find my voice in rooms I didn't think I belonged in. He encouraged me to go back to school, to study literature like I'd always dreamed. He sat through every open mic night, where I nervously read my poems to a half-interested crowd. He clapped the loudest every single time. It wasn't the money that changed my life. It was his belief in me when I still doubted myself. And over time, I started to believe it too. We moved in together, not to some giant mansion, but to a warm, quiet townhouse with creaky stairs and sunlit windows. A place that smelled like cinnamon on Sundays and carried laughter in the walls. We built something simple, something real. He still has investments, still sits on boards, but he does it differently now, more present, less chained. Sometimes people ask me how I caught a billionaire, as if I cast some kind of spell, as if I tricked him, and I always laugh a little, not because it's funny, but because it's so far from the truth. I didn't catch him. We collided. Two people, two paths, and a moment that could have been a tragedy became the start of something beautiful. I think we're all waiting to be seen, not looked at, seen. And Nathan? He saw me when I didn't even know I was worth noticing. But more importantly, he stayed. even when I pushed him away, even when I questioned everything. He stayed. And now, every morning, I wake up next to him, and I don't feel like I'm living in someone else's story anymore. This life, this love, it's mine too. To any girl out there who thinks she's invisible, I see you. I was you. And trust me, you don't have to change yourself to be loved deeply. You don't need to be rich or polished or perfect. You just have to be you, fully, completely, honestly. That's what saved me. That's what made him stay. And that's what turned a near accident into the greatest love story I never saw coming. So, no, I'm not just the girl he almost hit. I'm the woman who changed his life. And he changed mine right back. So, yeah, that's how a billionaire crashed into me, literally. And somehow, I ended up crashing into his heart. If you made it this far, thank you. Drop a comment if you believe love finds you when you least expect it. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell because you don't want to miss my next story. Trust me,